Hello, Hoopheads, and welcome to the weekly Hoopla, where I break down the need to knows of the busy world of the NBA. As we get started, we'll do the injuries as usual. Of course, this is not because we like to talk about injuries, it's just because it's the most important part of the long NBA season. Starting off this with probably the most notable player in this news, Bradley Beal, the third co-star of the Phoenix Suns super team, is yet to allow this team to actually form in the regular season due to a lower back strain. He will be out another 3 weeks. That was actually about a week ago. So realistically, I think you're looking at maybe even somewhere near Christmas Day as being the first time we actually get to see the Suns in full action. As for the lower back strain, I think this sort of shows why Bradley Beal's market wasn't so great beyond just that contract. I think there is significant injury issues that teams are going to have to worry about. Obviously, the Suns a little bit different. So when it was just a very cheap, reasonable offer, I think you can see why it wasn't as hard for a team with a new owner. The other stars probably pushing for this to happen. But now we know a little bit more about the Beal situation. Obviously, this could be all mute. The Suns are healthy when they need to be, but remains to be seen. For a team that's not got such high expectations, the Detroit Pistons, Monte Morris is going to miss another 6 to 8 weeks after getting an injection to his quad because of nerve irritation. Monte Morris is a really talented guard, probably not one of the biggest household names, but a guy who's been able to keep his name at the top of assist to turnover ratios dating back to even his college days at Iowa State. It's actually really incredible how this guy is just, you give him enough time healthy, he's going to be a net positive in that category. Obviously, he has some other issues that I think is why he's more of a so-so role player so far in his career. But not only could he be really useful to what Detroit needs at the moment, he could be really useful to a lot of what teams need at the moment on a reasonable contract. So a lot of people are excited to see that. Obviously, another massive deadline to where he's probably not going to start his season till mid to late January. Not the greatest for trade value, but of course that is before the deadline, so could be worse. Marcus Smart is going to have a 3 to 5 week window for his foot sprain. So the injuries just keep piling up for the Grizzlies, who could be probably 5 to 6 wins if they're lucky by the time John Morant plays for them in another 10 games or so. So don't know if the Grizzlies will be able to turn this season around because they're definitely starting behind the 8 ball. And Marcus Smart's injury is definitely not going to help, although he wasn't really helping them much win games, at least with all these injuries anyway. So obviously the Grizz could get healthy and make a good push into the qualifying tournament. But I don't believe that I would put my money on that. The health and the injuries of this team have long been sort of overdue. I think there's probably some major transitions that need to be made. And unfortunately, that kind of puts Marcus Smart's future even as, is this just a stopgap for his career, or is this something he can help Grizzlies rebuild with Ja and Jaren Jackson Jr., who I'm sure neither of those guys are really that close to being traded. But there probably is a reimagining of this particular Grizzlies team coming down the road. Jay Crowder, not necessarily the biggest news in the world, but for a team that is so top end heavy like the Milwaukee Bucks, having a Jay Crowder out for 2 months is certainly not ideal. He had tears in his adductor and his abdomen. So that's definitely not a fun and comfortable injury. 2 months is definitely a long timetable for a team that is needy for all the minutes they could get. Though, again, there's still a lot of suspicion on how much Jay Crowder would even be used continuing through the season. I think I am one who probably would guess that they will use Jay Crowder throughout the season, and he will at least be somewhat relevant as long as they're playing basketball. Obviously, they still need to upgrade around even his presence. So nothing really new changing there other than Milwaukee just sort of trying to navigate this season as an older team with a lot of high salary players. Not too bad so far, but obviously, I guess in a way you could say that this is a better thing for now than the later anyway. Larry Nance is back with the New Orleans Pelicans, but CJ McCollum is still going to remain sidelined for a little bit as he comes back. Same is going to be with Jamal Murray, who last we spoke, I thought that you would see a little bit more Jamal Murray by now, but they're still being very precautious with him as the Nuggets are struggling a little bit. But again, early in the season, I don't think the Nuggets really care that much. And because of some other injury news down the road, it's not the worst time in the world for that. What it is a pretty bad time for is the Atlanta Hawks. Jalen Johnson, who's probably one of the standout candidates for most improved player of the year, or at least to start this season. He suffered a 4 to 6 week injury with a wrist. So I think there could be a reevaluation period. It seemed like a couple of articles wanted to contradict each other a little bit, but I think essentially what that means is 3 to 4 weeks. They'll reevaluate. More realistically, 4 to 6 weeks, we'll actually see him on a basketball court again. This is typically what happens with NBA injuries. They'll give you the timetables that I regurgitated to you, but then remember that timetable is just the next time you'll actually hear from us on when this guy will play or when he'll start practicing, or you know what I mean? It doesn't mean he's going to start playing the day after. Potentially scary injury happened last night with the Luka Doncic Mavericks going and playing the Los Angeles Clippers. Game wasn't particularly great for a lot of the Mavericks side of that, but I think the good news is at least you're talking about no severe injury. We don't really know the news, but it does worry me about where this comes in the season for the Mavericks. They're still a bit of a team in transition, and I don't think they have any sort of depth to really be able to sustain even just Luka's poor shooting if there's an injury with his hand or whatever might result of this. So definitely a little bit of adversity here for the Mavericks moving into the next couple of weeks, but we'll see what the actual diagnosis for Luka's injury is. Then finally, the most important injury news, I think, so far in between this last time I talked, Jaden McDaniels has got another injury, an ankle sprain, and this one's going to take him out for at least 2 to 3 weeks. Minnesota Timberwolves have been one of the better surprises this season. Anthony Edwards, obviously a big part of that, but the overall defensive tenacity of this group certainly makes them interesting when you have Karl Anthony Towns' ability to shoot, when you have Anthony Edwards' star power. There's still a lot of growth, obviously, even with McDaniels, but I still think that this is, that great start that they got to, even though the Nuggets have been quite bad over the last couple of weeks. I do think that ultimately this is the great opportunity for them to jump in, seize control of the opportunity, and take back the lead in the division and maybe even get a little bit of a grasp, because Minnesota's not going to fall off from this, but this severely hurts Minnesota's ability to win the big games, right? So when they're going up against teams that they really need McDaniels to be the stopper, not that Anthony Edwards can't handle it, not that they don't have some other talented guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. It's just that you would really like to have your ace in the hole defender, and McDaniels just changes, I think, their ceiling. And you'll see that probably over this 2 to 3 week span, because they were pretty good without him to start the season, but now things are getting a little bit more difficult, and I do expect that to sort of show. That's pretty much the injury news of all this. And I didn't leave an injury ticker for you guys, so I'm sorry, but boom, the news and rumors section has begun. A lot to get into because I did take a little extra time off, not just for the holidays, but to get this reset for Monday mornings, figuring that's probably a better time to get you guys all caught up on the weekly events. So next week we will be back on a Monday schedule and there won't be so much to go over. But this week, that is not the case. We're going to start with something that happened way back on November 17th, almost 10 days ago now. Russell Westbrook elected to become the sixth man of the Los Angeles Clippers' very stacked and redundant starting group. Since then, the Clippers are 4-1. Given 2 of those games have been against San Antonio, and the one loss was a very troubling loss in which Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram pounded the paint, and even with Daniel Theis, maybe Plumlee helps when you have it all together, but still really concerned for how the Clippers are going to guard the paint in the playoffs, and especially particularly the rim. And it's sort of an issue we always see with these teams trying to win titles is you have this great group, but rim protection, especially now, I think is as important as it ever has been. It doesn't maybe feel that way, but ultimately, there's a lot of guys out there that are great at slashing. We get caught up in the third or the 3-point shooting all the time, but the slashing is just as important now. The free throws are just as important in the playoffs. So rim protection, absolutely vital in this regard. So you're definitely kind of worried about that loss. However, we are starting to see a positive trend with Russell Westbrook. Now, there was some bad stats with at least the first 3 games. Then Ty Lue acknowledged that, hey, I need to probably do a little bit better job empowering Russ when it is Russ's time, because that's the whole point of putting him in 6-man role, right? First chance you get, Mavericks. No offense, Mavs fans. This is a pretty good gig for the Russell Westbrook showcase, right? I think Lively doesn't play in the game either, so it's really nice, right? 14, 8, and 7 with just 2 turnovers in 25 minutes, right? So this is a perfect little stat line. This is what you want him to get to. Right now, the averages don't quite reflect that. The percentages certainly aren't ideal. The percentages in my mind don't really worry me with Russ as much, as long as the shots aren't too crazy, and that's kind of the best part of the 6-man role for him. So really, like I said, you see high assist, high rebound, good, decent 10-plus point outing, limit the turnovers. That's what you want. I'm not saying it's perfect for the Clippers, but I'm saying Russell Westbrook winning a 6-man of the year definitely becomes more possible. Your team gets better as a result. But he doesn't protect the rim, so the Clippers still got plenty to deal with. Just wanted to do a check-in there because I did say I wasn't going to rush to judge the Harden Clippers too soon. Still feel like the ceiling is an interesting question for them, but I think they're good. I think they're going to stay good, and I think that it's not as bad as it's going to seem. Maybe long term we look at this team as not a great thing. I think right now it's too early to write that chapter in history, at least for me. On to a little funnier note here. LaMelo Ball has decided that he wanted to get an LF, standing for La France, aka his middle name / his personal clothing company. And yes, you did hear me right, LaMelo La France Ball. That is his real name. Thank you, LeVar. Only you could give us something like that. NBA wasn't happy about it. I think that initially there was a picture of him getting covered up, but I don't think he covered up the tattoo. I think he's just going to wear a little patch over it. Maybe he did both. I didn't really follow that aspect when I was doing a little double check here on the research. Either way, just a funny note. This doesn't mean jack shit to anything. It's just funny. If you remember a few years back, he's been retired for a while now, but 5 or so years back, J.R. Smith tried to do the Supreme armband NBA flip shit. One thing you have to know about the NBA is they're not going to be very proactive in a lot of things, as we will get to. But they, you start fucking with their free time with that ad money. You're not paying for that. You're just getting free advertisement. No, that's where that's where you get immediate and quick reaction from the NBA. Either way, like I said, funny. Don't need to go further. Let's see. Greg Popovich. Spurs aren't very good. We've talked about that a little bit on the podcast. It's not a big deal. Some even might say that they're intentionally not being very good. Fine. Clippers come into town. We know that's a little interesting, right? You have Kawhi Leonard. Spurs fans not quite over that. We will get to it. You also have Josh Primo technically returning, though obviously not playing. So a little weird reunion for Spurs fans to watch the Clippers right now, I'd imagine. So Kawhi's shooting free throws throughout this whole game. He's been getting booed. I think this is pretty weird. How many times he's actually played in San Antonio since he's left. But ultimately, they're always going to boo his ass. Pop decided, hey, I don't like this. We're a first-class organization. We don't boo ex-players. Let's play ball. And what did Spurs fans do? They booed louder. And I think that is both fair and funny at the same time because, look, Pop is Pop. He thinks he can dictate the thing. He shits on. I mean, he says more hateful shit to the Spurs fans sometimes than anyone else, right? Like he's hard on these people because he respects them and loves them, and I think that he tries to really keep that whole culture, be the caretaker of the whole thing. When in reality, that no one man can do that, no matter how great you are, especially in Popovich's case. But one of the big things that I wanted to mention with this is, it's a tough time right now, Pop. You got to just maybe let him have it. You got Jeremy Sohan playing way out of position. The numbers that are coming back, they're not good numbers. It's almost intentional. Like, you got Branham, you got Jones. It feels like you got guys that could probably start at the point guard position right now, and you're not doing it. So I think Spurs fans might be just kind of a little bit more pissed off about that than they are just Kawhi Leonard's whole history with them. So just saying, Bob. On to an interesting topic here, one that I probably will be talking a little bit out of my ass on, but I don't think so. I don't think that this is something that is that hard to figure out, but I do think I kind of have the reason why. NBA's in-season tournament courts are very controversial for a lot of things, right? Their looks, how it, just the overall experience. The most important one so far is the slipperiness, right? Big question when they started this is, why are you doing this? Because you wouldn't even let us have the logo on the court for the NBA Finals. So why the hell would you do this now if it's still slippery? Guys are coming in, they're saying it's slippery. Jaylen Brown, Precious Achiuwa, Tyrese Halliburton. That's just three. Luka Doncic. Some very particular comments from Luka that I wanted to bring up. He says the painted area specifically is bad, right? Makes me think. It's very quick and easy to say, hey, NBA, you're idiots. You guys rushed this. Because they literally did. But I will come to their semi-defense here. Because it's still kind of on them. Is it not possible that this new court design is just really hard for the people who have to clean the courts to see where the sweat is? Maybe some courts aren't. But perhaps they're just not quite as used to it as they are when it's the regular hardwood. Maybe that's not the case in any way, but I'm starting to lean towards this. And part of me said this because there was also a video of LeBron James, very, very, very detailed in his approach to testing the court slipperiness prior to whatever Lakers home game was this past Thursday, I think. And very interestingly enough, no problems. Again, makes me wonder. It's not probably the court. It's not probably the decals. My guess is it's probably the poor people who clean up all the sweat all the time in the games. You're always seeing those sweepers. They have one of the hardest jobs in the NBA. Honestly, we don't talk about it enough, but it is kind of a bitch because you're basically watching out for all of the slippery sliminess of constantly sweating people for 48 minutes, right? And especially at the restricted area where people are standing at the free throw line, it pools up. That's where they really get their most work in. I am just spitballing here. I'm sure that the courts probably have some differences. Maybe there is a little bit more slipperiness because of the color. I don't know. But it might also be as simple as saying maybe the freaking people who clean the courts just need a little adjustment period because you didn't really give it to them, Just saying. All right. If you're a Bulls fan, I think that you're probably used to this by now, but you might want to, maybe mute me for a little bit. Don't turn away. Stay with us. Love us. We don't wish this upon the Bulls, but this downfall will be televised. This much we know. Starting on November 19th, which feels like ancient history now, but of course I still need to get all of this stuff covered for you guys. So Bulls win a tight game. We come back over the Miami Heat, if I remember correctly. And after the game, Zach LaVine sort of brushes off a PR member for the Bulls that wants to have him do a little post game, right? Doesn't go super well. We get a lot of other reports about how Billy Donovan doesn't like that. Now, it was a mistake. It was a miscommunication is what they end up saying. So that's all that is, right? But it kind of keeps the continued obvious, inevitable end here for Zach LaVine and the Bulls. The reports are coming back on negative trade value. Not great. They're also coming back in interesting places like Charlotte. Doesn't necessarily matter. Rumors can say anything, right? But it does start to make me think if maybe perhaps Zach LaVine's value really is that bad because the Miami Heat allegedly don't want to be a part of the deal, mostly because of luxury taxes and a similar reason why they didn't want anything to do with Bradley Beal. So I think, okay, Philly, Los Angeles, certainly seems like you guys might want to have this player. I mean, he is an LA kid. He is a clutch client. So the Lakers feel almost, they're the fucking Lakers. I mean, when have they never been part of a trade rumor? So it makes me wonder if even those teams would say no to a Zach LaVine trade, given what we know about LaVine's play, given what we know about his contract, and a little bit of concern about his injury history. Is there enough problem with the people trying to contend right now that Zach ends up going to Orlando, Charlotte, somebody close? I think the Raptors have been named a lot. I think the Raptors may be the perfect spot for him now that we're starting to talk about it. But then are they imploding? Are they starting to think about auctioning off their parts? Because you can't have LaVine without Siakam and OG in my mind. I mean, you need defense. You need people that can handle it, especially if Zach is the scorer. So I find that interesting. The reports also indicate that the Bulls GM Arturas Karnisovas, I believe it's Arturas, but it's Karnisovas for sure, is willing to ride out this trade till the bitter end. Now, naturally, December 15th is probably the most likely soonest date because you're going to need trade fodder, and most guys that have signed their contracts can't be traded until December 15th anyway, right? So that's fair. Can't really kill him for that. But you do have to wonder how much you hold on if you're Karnisovas here. If the writing's on the wall, if the amount of people who are actually in on this sweepstakes are sort of limited, do you, and I think I already talked about it here. If not, let's reiterate. I think the Bulls are probably better off trying to immediately cut LaVine into a similar Harden thing with Philly, right? Cut LaVine into whatever. Just make the trade, find the right partner, make the best possible deal, right? Easier said than done, but still do that. Then let's test this Bulls run a little bit more, because you do kind of feel like you're closer. Maybe there's some chemistry things, and I kind of feel like LaVine's constant issue, even if he doesn't have beef with the players or the coaches or whatever, is still a big enough issue to where now I feel like if I remove this piece and get ample stuff back, maybe, just maybe, I can have the season that gives me enough progress to what the future of the Bulls could look like, right? If not, then now DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, and honestly, the whole damn roster, but Caruso, kind of big names here, they will start to be more attractive trade partners. And that kind of gets me more interested, right? So we'll see how it ends up going, how long they end up waiting. But as of yesterday, DeMar DeRozan had some pretty negative comments aimed at Pascal Siakam after a tough loss in which Siakam took like a late shot because, of course, in in-season tournament games, there's a point differential thing that matters. And even though both teams were eliminated prior to this game, Siakam took the shot. DeRozan took the other shot in the media. And we're basically looking at them both like, what's going on with both of these franchises? The Raptors, I'm patient with, because the Raptors are confounding. They're so confusing. They make sense and then they don't at the same time. They're well run and then they're absolute chaos all in one. I don't know how to describe it better than that. They're the most unpredictable team in the NBA, and I would even argue maybe even professional sports, because they have a head honcho that just doesn't. He wants to play the smoke and mirrors game to death, and what. Quote after the game beyond the Siakam beef was DeMar DeRozan saying, "I can't fake it. I'm beyond frustrated." He did go on to say that any winning streak could spark the run the Bulls need to turn the season around. But I think that he's not a stupid guy. I think that he probably sees the writing on the wall here as well. Lonzo Ball's injury is always going to sort of be the start of this downfall for the team. But at the end of the day, I do feel like this is a really interesting point. Again, if I'm the GM, December 15th is almost the deadline for me to make sure the deal gets done so that I can try to revive this team. Because I think the 2K blow it up approach sounds great to us fans. think it's super impossible to just completely do in the middle of a season. So I don't think the Bulls will completely dismantle themselves, but you do have to wonder how long we have to keep riding this roller coaster, because they're not good. They've got a lot of issues. They've got three players that don't make sense to winning basketball together, right? For reasons that we don't need to get into here. They don't make sense together. They never did. They tried it anyway. You makeshift a roster. This is what you get. You get mediocre. You didn't really swing for the fences. You swing for the mediocre fences, and you burnt out, which is worse. I mean, most of the time you get to mediocre, you don't even spend the resources they spent to get mediocre. So, it's not as easy as tanking, but you've got to wonder what, like, is Carniceva's going to save his job, or are we just watching a guy in this final year piss away the franchise? And before anyone gets excited, the Bulls do not seem like the kind of team that would be willing to move on. In fact, their stubbornness is definitely one of their key traits as far as an organization. So he's more than likely still the guy leading the charge moving forward, regardless of what the roster looks like. Speaking of potential trade targets, all three of those names, Siakam, LaVine, OG, those have been the names on the market for quite a bit now. Obviously, those aren't the easiest deals to get done for a number of reasons that I've already laid out. But the most interesting headline from this is Shams Charania saying that for the first time since Chris Webber was a King, yes, since I was a little boy, the Sacramento Kings have the assets and are in position to be trade players. And I just wanted to bring this up because I think it's an awesome moment for Kings fans. I think it's an awesome moment for that franchise and what they've done. But at the same time, I'm also curious as to how you take that next step, right? So I like LaVine, I like Siakam, I like OG. For them, though, obviously, I think LaVine is a tough buy for me because I think offensively, I don't worry about them as much. Defensively, they are completely why. I mean, I think Sabonis can take a step, I do think, but Sabonis protecting the rim isn't ideal. Then after that, there's just no real five. You have kind of JaVale McGee doing all right. You have Alex Len giving you spot minutes, but I feel like you have to go out and find a five. You have to find something a little bit more hardy at the five. Siakam, not perfect for that role, but an interesting sidekick. OG would be sort of a different version, right? It would be a little more the Denver Nuggets style of rim protection, where it's a team-oriented rim protection, and then OG would sort of have to be that stopper defensively, and then you would have to hope the rest of the lines stayed together. Again, I'm not predicting those because it's very hard to tell what the Raptors are going to do, and two of those players are Raptors, and the other one is Zach LaVine, who has all of the stuff we've mentioned before. So I'm happy for Kings fans, but I don't know where to point you in the direction of, because I wouldn't call this the most ample market for immediate upgrades. In non-basketball related news, but still pretty damn interesting news, the New York Knicks are suing the Toronto Raptors, and James Dolan has resigned from his position as a Board of Governors member. What this means in a long term, or in short, is sort of good and sort of bad and sort of maybe nothing. James Dolan, his resignation from the Board of Governors is probably a little bit more welcomed. Someone else will represent the Knicks. It's not like the Knicks don't have representation. It's just not that dude anymore. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that there's probably not that many people mad about that inside of that. It just looks kind of bad. But at the end of the day, that part isn't the big deal. The lawsuit, however, is maybe not in the big deal market, but it at least is the notable part of the story. They're suing for $10 million in damages and are arguing that Commissioner Adam Silver should not be an arbitrator in this issue because he is too close to the president and governor of the Toronto Raptors, Larry Tannenbaum, someone the Knicks even are trying to paint as a mentor-like figure to Adam Silver. Lots to unwrap there. James Dolan, not that surprised that he would get pissy and do this. the Knicks have been very shielded off since they've sort of done this new CAA collab thing that maybe we shouldn't call official CAA collab, but essentially is, where you basically have Leon Rose and a former agency running the team, similar to how people joke about the Lakers and Clutch. It is basically the same thing with the Knicks and CAA. And it's a very interesting little thing that's developed. It's been for the better for the Knicks and for the NBA, in my opinion. So I'm not that mad at it. But this is certainly a weird one, and probably not what Knicks fans want to see right now when they're trying to build something, take that next step in the progress. But again, this doesn't necessarily impact basketball either. So it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just an annoyance. As a Cowboy fan, we're very used to these annoyances. Knicks, Cowboys, very similar fan bases in a lot of ways. So this all stems from an accusation that a former Knicks staffer, a guy who worked in the film departments, sent thousands of emails with confidential files to the Toronto Raptors. And it alleges that the Raptors were in on it. It even has their current head coach and some other people named in the lawsuit as well. So interesting there. I feel like this is probably something that's happened quite a bit in the NBA world, but maybe with the new technology that we are able to figure out guys doing this easier, whatever it is. But I would be very surprised if this wasn't very common. Or at least, there's a certain path, and maybe this guy was just really egregious to the way he went about it. But either way, interesting lawsuit to look forward to and kind of monitor. Again, I don't really know much more than that. I know that this has been an ongoing issue. This is probably the furthest that it's gotten to, which is why we're bringing it up for the Hoopla. Of course, the Raptors are calling this a PR stunt, and of course, the NBA is just, going to be like, well, we want to handle this matter internally and blah, blah, blah. So as much as I don't want to defend James Dolan and the Knicks, I do find it interesting. I find this Adam Silver news interesting. I don't think it's outside of Adam Silver's character either. So I am very interested to see where this goes, because while the Knicks seem like the most likely to cry wolf unnecessarily, I kind of want to hear them out. Because we've seen this before in other leagues. And your favoritism with your owner, with your governor, is your governors and with the commissioner is just not ideal. You want there to have a feeling of neutrality, if even if that's just a facade. You want to have some feeling of that if you're a fan. Speaking of, actually, we're just hitting a whole 3 block of this makes the NBA look bad section. We're just not in the good shit right now. Sorry, Adam. If you're watching this, get your shit together. Get your league together. I love it, but get your shit together. Scott Foster, you motherfucker. Not because I'm a CP3 fan. I do love CP, but it's really just, I meme you. There's the Jack Harlow video that I just can't get enough of, where you're lip singing a Jack Harlow song and looking like a complete tool. But it showed me who you really are, Scott. It showed me that you're really the guy who wants to make it about you. It shows me that you're kind of crooked. And it shows me that, actually, that doesn't show me you're crooked. Your history shows me you're crooked. And it shows me that you have way too much fucking power in the National Basketball Association. And that, Adam Silver, is bad. Because not only is this a former person that Tim Donaghy associated with, emailed with, blah, blah, blah with, right? Not only have you let him slide for that almost entirely, but now we have 20 years of evidence of him versus Chris Paul. And I don't actually know when this whole thing started. At this point, I'm sure there's at least 4 different SB Nation videos on it, or Secret Base videos on it on YouTube. Go watch those. But after this, it's kind of gotten to the most ridiculous points. Of course, this past week, Chris Paul was ejected. In turn, turned around and called Scott Foster a bitch multiple times, at least that we could see on camera. Of course, Scott says, "Oh, I told him, enough, relax." So there's people, of course, going to defend Scott Foster, and I'm not trying to convince people to be on the Chris Paul side of this, but I'm just trying to say, like, the Scott Foster thing is getting out of hand. It's been out of hand, right? It is, you have CP going after the scrum or after the game, and he's talking about how it's a massive issue, how the league has had a meeting on it, how it just doesn't matter, right? It's just this guy just it keeps going, right? There is no punishment for him. There is only punishment for Chris Paul. And I think even if you're against Chris Paul, you have to understand where that's just bullshit. That just doesn't make a damn bit of sense. This is an ongoing issue. Tom Haberstroh, one of the most respected people in NBA media, comes out with a story that has damning proof of how much implication Scott Foster's had on the playoff career of Chris Paul. And again, even if you think Chris Paul warrants this because of his play and his style, I get you, but I also say that can't be the reason. It just can't. It can't be our referees they can't be fucking Batman. They're not Batman. Like they are to call the game. They're supposed to make it fair. If Chris Paul is a problem and his antics are a problem, the NBA needs to fine him, suspend him, and handle it that way. They need to set the example, not the referees, because it's going to continue to do this. It's going to continue to be a problem, and we're going to keep having this thing. And it's funny for the memes, it's funny for the jokes, but in all reality, we don't want this in sports at all, at any level. We don't want this in sports. We want our referees to do great jobs and not be fucking heard from. No offense, referees. It's just not your fucking role. It's not your job. Everyone in sports has to know their place. It's such an easy world to get lost in the grand scheme of what I'm doing, the self-importance, right? It's baffling. It can't be. And it's a thing in NBA history and with a lot of referees and a lot of other leagues where they're showmen as well. And it's like, I want them to have fun. I want them to be stewards of the game, but this is fucking ridiculous. I can't even tell you how much I'm overhearing Scott Foster and CP in the same world together. Like it's embarrassing, but it's only one of those ugly stains, and good Lord, our NBA players certainly can't keep these stains from amassing and maybe giving Adam Silver a little fucking time to work on something else, because our final news story today is quite not awesome to talk about, and I don't have a lot of information that's great, so we're going to just give you the quick bullet points and move on, because I don't know what to tell you on this one. I wouldn't even bring it up if it hadn't already gotten to a point where the team in the league has to have response. Frankly, I didn't have it in my rundown until that. That's why it's last. Josh Giddey, Oklahoma City's talented young player, has been accused of inappropriate relationship with a minor. The proof is coming from many pictures of seems like maybe from Snapchat, maybe from this girl's Instagram story, whatever it is. Sort of this online collection from most likely fans or whoever, overly internet obsessed humans, putting together these collections of photos and making this claim. Now, I did just roast all these internet people, but if this is the case, then I am happy that little citizen journalism is getting done. I just also caution people to understand all the facts, do a little, there's a reason why when you search this story right now, no one's got distinct facts, because everything that's online, and honestly, the reason I'm not giving you detailed facts is because everything online is conjecture at this point. We just don't know. It's whatever you believe, whatever you think, because there's no concrete evidence as to what the fuck is going on here. Obviously, you're getting no comments from Oklahoma City and from the player. He's just playing along, because at this point, this could just be a dumb internet rumor that has no legs, right? But of course, it is gross and it is not awesome and it's a bad look. I don't care. I know he's a young player. I know he's young looking, even in his face. I was there before this stubble. I had the baby face all the time up until fucking 27, right? Like I get where there's some growing up that needs to be done, immensely for Mr. Giddey. But this is weird. I'm not going to get into why all of the reasons this is weird. I'm just saying it. I don't particularly love it. I don't love a lot of the things these guys end up getting in trouble with in the out of basketball world. But I know it's an inevitable part of this thing. So that's all my kind of personal opinion is with it. The other important note here, of course, and this is again not something I'm excited to report, but age of consent is 16 in Oklahoma. So it's possible that both things are true. It's possible that he's legally fine and that these rumors are true, which makes it even grosser and makes it even way, way more just not fun. So I know I'm rooting for the positive, happy, easy outcome, but ultimately I'm really rooting for the NBA to take this fucking seriously, have an answer as quickly as possible, and let's move forward with whatever the result is, because this is many, many things piling up at this point related to the same extracurricular activity of our favorite NBA players, and it's just not conducive to the business. And maybe you could argue that this is a small percentage compared to what it is. Maybe, you know what I mean? I feel you, but I just can't understand why the NBA continues to act like this. You know, we want to stand as a league of change and as progression, but then we just fall so far behind in the easiest ways. I feel like we let these little things sort of go, and I think that the NBA PA has a lot to do with that. They're very powerful, very, very powerful compared to a lot of other leagues. So I know it's not just as easy as the NBA coming down with iron fist all the time. But at this point, I mean, if this is real and if this is, you know, an illegal relationship and this is, you know, something that will eventually be a legal issue, they've got to be hard. They've got to be very, very hard. This is beyond embarrassing. Beyond. And the internet jokes or whatever, I'm not going to get mad at people for making fucking internet jokes. It's what the internet does. You know what I mean? 9/11 is the most tragic thing that I've ever been alive for, and people make fun of it every day, right? It's just a part of the coping of the world. So I don't think we should go crazy on it. I've already seen probably too many jokes about this particular subject, but, you know, it is what it is. These players are going to act like this. I can't expect the world to act any better. All right. Moving on to the final and more positive stuff. Our final in-season tournament check before we get into the actual tourney. Now, I think that by the next time I talk to you guys, we will be we'll be in the middle ground between, I'll be able to give you sort of the rundown of what the actual tournament will look like itself, who's in, who's out, and when it's happening. But for now, let's just talk about the simpleness. So far on out, we have Pistons, Wizards, Raptors, Bulls, Jazz, Blazers, Grizz, Nuggies, surprisingly, but not that surprisingly if you've been watching. Mavs, not great, but fine. Clippers, understandable. Thunder, kind of wild. And Spurs, not surprising. So those are the teams that will not be playing in the tournament. Teams that will be so far are the Indiana Pacers and the Los Angeles Lakers, who finished with 4-0 records in group play. The Bucks and the Kings are the only other teams that can lock up their groups doing the same thing. The Bucks play at Miami, and the Kings play host the Warriors on Tuesday, which this Tuesday, tomorrow, if you're seeing this on Monday, is going to be the last day of the group play games. The Magic and the Pelicans are in the driver's seat for the remaining games, or for the remaining groups, rather. And the wild card spots are currently being held by the Knicks, who play the Hornets at home. They don't have a massive point differential, but there's an opportunity with the Hornets. There's some health issues with the Knicks right now, but if they can be healthy and ready for that game on Tuesday, they can win the game and put enough space in the point differential where they lock that in. And then the current wild card for the West is the Phoenix Suns. So, hey, KD and Booker handling business just fine at this point. They are done playing. They've completed all 4 games, but they have a 18-point differential over Houston, who would be the only other team, I guess not only other, but they're the second team behind them in the wild card standings. However, they'll play at Dallas, so it's very unlikely that they go to Dallas and smoke the Mavericks. Of course, maybe Luka's injury changes that projection, but unless they go and just shithouse the Mavericks, the Suns are most likely your wild card. And realistically, you're just looking at a couple like the Pelicans and the Magic group. Those 2 groups as your open ones, even though I think maybe you could trust those 2 teams as well. That's pretty much it for where we're going to go. The standing stuff is interesting. You have Chicago and Detroit down. You have Golden State Warriors not looking perfect, but maybe starting to get their stuff together. You have the Mavericks stumbling a little bit. You have a lot of mediocrity in some of the groups. You have a lot of heavy groups. We have a couple of teams or a couple of divisions where they're just stacked this year, and it's just notable. So it'll be fun to watch all those play out. Sacramento certainly looking like they're for real and they're staying here, and maybe they're more of a contender than I think most people were willing to give them coming into the season. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a long ass NBA season, and since this in-season tournament comes in and helps us, we're just going to keep doing it this way. Cover the in-season tournament for a couple more weeks, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. We'll talk about the leaderboards. We'll talk about the standings. We'll talk about kind of not really going to project MVP and the award stuff, but we can start to get an idea of who's where in those categories, and that will give us a lot more time. Of course, in-season tournament, we don't really know how much guys are going to care that much going into this thing, but we're going to go ahead as fans and do our due diligence and try to enjoy this thing a little bit and not rush ahead into, Christmas Day, into the trade deadline. All that stuff is coming. We know that it's often that we are the ones more excited about the situation than the actual excitement that's going to come with the regular season. Obviously injuries are always a big part of this early part of the season. But we'll get into rotation checks, and we'll get into all that nitty gritty crap. Right now, it's still sort of your intro to the 2023, 2024 NBA season. But thank you guys as always. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. Always feel free to jump into the comments. We want to get to know you guys. We want to get to know how we can tailor this better. We would like to have banter with sports fans. I mean, that's why we do this. And we want to build something so that you guys can kind of enjoy some live shows with us maybe in the future. And like I said, I appreciate you guys for watching this far. And hey, go out and enjoy your life. There's more to sports, but when you're done enjoying life, come back to us.